how's it going? Thanks for coming. How is Vidcon so far? 10 out of 10, right?
Hello.
Name. Okay, so as always, I always like to start so everybody introduces themselves, tells you who they are, so that if you're interested, you can find and follow all of these beautiful, wonderful humans talking about mental health. So do you want to start down at the end? We'll work our way back.
My channel is Elainey. My name is Annie Segara in real life. I have a YouTube channel that's mainly first-person vlogs, and I talk about my observations and experiences as a disabled queer woman of color. I talk a lot about my physical disability, which is Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. So it's a chronic pain disability. It also affects my internal organs. And within the past couple of years, I've also opened up about depression and anxiety. And prior to that, I also discussed having body dysmorphic disorder, which I'm generally recovered from, but it can always relapse with as well.
I'm Connor Manning. I too am a video blogger in which most of my content revolves around kind of first person sort of narrative about where I am and who I am. I make content about mental health, both my own personal things and also things in general. Personally, I have dealt with things such as depression, anxiety, substance abuse, and I've been in recovery for that for about 5 years. And thank you. And I also do content about LGBT things of that nature, as gender fluid, bisexual stuff, like all that kind of things. Essentially, my channel is a reflection of me wherever I am, and what I'm thinking about as things become relevant to me, they kind of become relevant to my YouTube channel. So that's part of that.
I'm Jessica. I do How to ADHD with my fiance Edward. I wish we did vlogs. We put way too much work into our channel, probably. We spend like 40 to 80 hours of video, but it's really important to us to give out a lot of solid research-backed information about ADHD because it's so misunderstood. There's so much misinformation out there. And that, even doctors have told me wrong things about it. So I'm like, okay, this is not right. There's so much research done on ADHD. It's the most well-researched mental condition. It's ridiculous that people don't know anything about their own disorder. And that was my story. So I decided to look into it and share some strategies.
I love it. So my name is Kati Morton. I'm a licensed therapist, and I have an educational mental health channel on YouTube. And my whole goal is just to educate and empower those who struggle and kind of encourage people to share their stories and know that they're not alone and that doesn't make you weird and nothing's wrong with you, all that good stuff. So thank you all for sharing your stories, first of all, because I always think that's really important, and I know that it gives a voice to people who might have felt like they didn't have one. I know. So we're here today to talk, I can't decide if I want this down or not, but we're here today to talk about how sharing our story online can be good or bad or whatever, and just talk about that. So that's kind of where we're going with it today. And so I want to open with, do you feel that talking about mental health information online has affected the way that you do verbalize it? Do you think it's made it more clear, easier for you to talk to people about it in your real life? Do you think it's changed that for you at all? I know that's a really hard question, but it's think of does it make it easier because you're used to talking about it, or does it make it harder? Do you only share it online?
I definitely share it everywhere. I have talked to 2 people since I got to Vidcon. The guy at the front desk at the hotel and the driver on the way over here both have ADHD, have really interesting stories about it. It's just become so automatic to me. And it wasn't before. Not because I was ashamed of it. I was actually really lucky to have, my aunt had it, and then I was diagnosed with it, and I liked her. She was my favorite aunt. So I was like, I get to be part of this cool club. So it was a cool thing to me. I didn't realize what a stigma there was against it. So I didn't know how important it was to talk about it. But once I started talking about it and realized the stigma and how people feel uncomfortable to share this, and they're looked at like they're weird, I was like, oh, it's really important to talk about. So it made it much more automatic for me to do that.
Yeah, and I agree. I find that when you do finally say stuff out loud, 1 in 4 are affected globally, just FYI. So that pretty much means everybody's known somebody, and I think that that's kind of important to remember.
With some sort of mental health issue.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, sharing for me kind of became a necessity, just for my own personal recovery. But in addition to that, just the more practice I got with it, I often refer to sort of the first year that I had in recovery, and on YouTube, it's as sort of like a feedback loop where I wanted to make better videos, and in order to do that, I had to become a better person. And so it kind of became one fed into the other, and for me, it was just sort of practice being authentically myself and being confidently myself. And part of that is owning my narrative, owning my story in a way that that can put it into language that other people can understand, but also in a way that normalizes it in order for me to feel normal and okay, but also to kind of spread that and spread that understanding and empathy to other people, because I try to attack everything I do personally with a degree of empathy, and I hope that that can spread amongst other people as they're listening to that story, hopefully.
So there's a couple ways I've navigated talking about mental health on YouTube, and so I think, half of it is cathartic and just kind of sharing my experiences and not really like offering necessarily a solution, but just kind of like, this is how I feel and this is how I feel okay expressing it. Like one of the videos I made was where I was having this horrible depression, anxiety attack for like a good 14 hours, where my heart just felt like I was diving for a full day straight, just sitting in bed filled with like self-loathing and anxiety and like just being pit down. And I felt so guilty for feeling those things. I was like, there's nothing wrong, there's nothing happening, but I feel like I'm falling off a building and I'm just in a constant state of panic. And I discussed with my mom, and she has depression as well. So she kind of has a good understanding. It's great that I have her to talk about it. And she's also a Harry Potter fan. and she put it in my head. She's like, you can't feel bad for your depression, because your depression is not you. Your depression is a whisper. Your depression is the Dementors. It is Voldemort. It's not a part of you. You're not doing anything bad. This is something that you are like fighting to survive. And that's an analogy that I put up on YouTube. So it wasn't necessarily a solution, but more like, this is how I can better communicate that. And the other way I navigated it was to talk about, what I found upon recovery with body dysmorphic disorder. So I spent so much time with like eating disorder and like very like toxic and harmful thoughts about myself and my body. And when I kind of started finding my way out of that darkness, it was very euphoric. It was very exciting, and that's the content I wanted to put out there. I'm like, I want this for everyone. I want everyone to wake up and like see the sun coming in through their window and be like, yes, like this, I feel good, I feel great, I am beautiful, I am worthy, I am valid. And so that's the kind of stuff I wanted to put out there. And then the third way is, and I don't do it, is when I do the cathartic sharing, and then I look back on it and I see, this is too dark to share. Like this is something that is not going to be helpful to put out into the world. This is something that I needed to do. I needed to talk to a video camera for a bit.
It was like journaling.
Yeah.
Like you were like, I needed to get it out.
And this specifically, what I'm remembering right now is actually, so last year with the Pulse massacre, that triggered my depression as a identity communal situation. Followed by a month later, there was also a massacre in Japan, a hate crime on a disabled communal home, where a person was, he said, the world will be a better place without disabled people, and went in and slaughtered an entire home of disabled people. So my two identities were attacked in that way by hate crimes. And so I took to the camera to talk about how invalidating and dehumanizing that felt. And when I rewatched it to edit it, I was like, this is
too
not
dark
good
to put out.
To put out there.
And
I just needed to say it, but that's that boundary of like, this is not for everyone else, this was for me.
Yeah, and I think that like vlogging in general, if any of you are looking for an outlet, regardless of whether you put it up, it can be a great way. Like I always encourage my community to journal, and I know they're probably sick of hearing about it, but it can be really good to like get it out, because otherwise it's just running in our head, and if we don't have someone we trust that we can talk about it with, that's a great way to do it, really. And so with sharing, each of you shared different things about yourself and different, illnesses or diagnoses or whatever that you're dealing with. What has been the response from your audience? Like, did you have a channel prior to sharing about like the ADHD or mental health? Or?
No, I'd done like a little bit of, I'm an actress first, or I was an actress first, and I still audition every once in a while, but I'm just really bad at memorizing lines. I'm not good at auditioning. But I'd done some YouTube sketches and things like that with a comedy group online, but like years and years ago. And this, so I was familiar with the idea of uploading videos to YouTube, and so it was a natural platform for me when I decided to start talking about it. But no, my intention from the beginning is I'm going to learn about my ADHD, and I'm going to teach what I learn. And that was kind of the whole point of it for me.
Yeah, I have had a YouTube channel for about 7 years. And it existed kind of prior to in like a weird kind of state in which I was like doing like a show, and then it kind of became something more. What it became was just me, and I became more skilled and more able to share things personally. So it was natural. It was a natural thing. So and as is sharing other parts of my identity and stuff like that, because for me it was primarily first person, but there's an element of, I don't know, I love the idea of the story. I love personal narrative. I love seeing growth in other people. I love being a part of that kind of a thing. So with me, there's like some really creative and artistic satisfaction in artfully sharing that in a way that's compelling, and in a way that other people appreciate. Like a comment that I get, a response that I get often is, you put it into words. And or like, how are you in my head or something? And it's like no, I'm not in your head, I'm in my own head. But I have a background in public speaking, and in high school I did a lot of that, and so that's something that like an art form in a way that has always been really compelling to me. Is like, how do I creatively weave together something that's just me speaking and using my voice in a way that connects emotionally to someone else, and doing that with my own story. It's like, it's personally satisfying, compelling. It's creatively and artistically satisfying as well, and it also does some good for people as well. So it's like threefold, and they all kind of feed each other. So for me, it was always natural, because it kind of taps into some fundamental aspects of me as a person outside of my mental illness, outside of my identity, just like parts of things that I enjoy, things that I like, and things that I want to do with my life. So it just kind of all feeds together like that.
So I've always done creative work, like since I was, I don't know, at least 2 to 4 years old. I was performing in performing arts, like singing, acting, things like that. And when I was 9 years old, I started writing really lengthy pieces that like forever and ever I'll always remember was like the one impressive thing I could do. Like my 4th grade teacher was like, what the heck? Why is this 9-year-old writing like this? So I always like feel very like proud of that. Like look at like the right thing I could do. So when I started creating videos, I just wanted to be Mark from Rent. I just wanted to like document things and montage them together. And eventually it became more of a journal style vlogging type thing where I started talking to the camera. And that was all very just like personal narrative, like, oh, something funny happened to me yesterday or whatever. And eventually, I got the hang of narrowing it down, like really like deciding, okay, today I want to talk about this topic and things like that, more focused. And I think it's part of my neurodivergence, but I have such a hunger for words and how to communicate things effectively, and effectively usually means creatively. And so, like I said, like with the Harry Potter analogy, like I like figuring out ways to allow people to understand, because I'm a person that often feels misunderstood. So I'm like, I'm going to try and like find every example possible so that I feel understood by another person, or in this case, an audience.
Yeah, I love that too. I use a lot of analogies in general. Yeah, metaphor, like however I can get it across. I'm sure any of my like Kenyans out there, I like always use different terms. Like as a therapist, I'm like a burglar. I'm trying to find that window where I can like get into your house and figure out what's wrong. Like, but you won't let me in, and
nothing.
That sounds creepy, but
then a slam an analogy.
But that's how I feel sometimes, because I'm like, I'm just trying my best and you won't let me in. You keep slamming the doors and shutting the windows and lock, you know. But like it can be powerful. You can get a lot across with analogies and metaphors. I always find this question, I'm sure Connor probably asked this before on another panel, and I apologize, but I find it interesting to know if you keep anything private, and if so, why? Because sharing information can feel like a lot sometimes, you know?
Yeah, there are certain things I keep private. I'm very open about my own struggles, but I'm very aware that not everybody in my life has made the same choice that I have to share everything about my life and my struggles or whatever. So I have a lot of people in my life that have mental health issues as well, and I don't talk about theirs without their permission. I don't talk about like conflicts that I have with other people. I really talk, if I do at all, I try to keep it about my side of the street, because it's, it's part of it's respecting their privacy, and part of it is going, all we can control is our side of things. So when I talk about struggles, I don't talk about it like it's somebody else's fault. Like what can I do? What can I change? Is what I try to keep it to. And then also our channel is family friendly. So the NSFW stuff, we do have like a Discord where it gets a little out of hand now and then, but that's not moderated. But our channel is really well moderated. We don't allow bullies or anything like that there. So
mine too. I approve all my comments, which can be kind of laborious, but it's also a safe place then.
Exactly.
You know?
Yeah, I the same thing. Anytime it involves somebody else, it's not any business to share to somebody who's not involved with that directly. There's also a line for me that sometimes sometimes less is more, and I oftentimes do not go into egregious detail about certain things, which is why I always find the comment like, oh, you're in my head, so interesting, because it just means that I'm just being an effective communicator, because I'm taking concepts that I'm trying to refer to, obviously with an element of specificity to myself, but I'm referring to general concepts, and I'm trying to do so in a way that you can kind of insert your own narrative into as well, so then it becomes about you, and you're making the realizations and all that. So I always find that comment funny that I get, because I do consider what I say and do very deliberately, because I am aware of how it affects me, because I saw a panel a few years ago, and something Charlie McDonald said. He talked about how he struggled when the video was personal and there was a negative comment, and how it felt personal to him. And I was like, ugh, like same, dude, because it's like a lot of what I do is so personal. So when someone calls it into question, when somebody trolls it or whatever, it feels like you're stabbing me in the heart 30,000 times. Like it feels like that, and it's painful. And that's the challenge when you make content that is personal and is first person, is how do you do that? How do you separate it? Because one of the strengths that I have is that I care, is that I take things personally. And that's a double-edged sword, because sometimes the world is mean and dark and does not accommodate you and is horrible to you. I had a video that I made in the fall about addiction, in which it blew up. It got a whole lot of views. With that were a lot of new eyes, and with new eyes generally are opinions that are not, you go outside your echo chamber, and all of a sudden there's people who do not speak your language, do not understand you, have no context with you at all, they don't see you as a human being. So there were a lot of horrid, horrible things said on a video that was incredibly personal, that for me is life and death, right? It can't get more personal than that. And it's tough, and it's something that when I'm trying to create things, is how do I tap into that first person personal narrative, but at the same time, how do I keep it non-specific enough that not only it can apply to other people and it's not just self-serving, but at the same time I can survive criticism, because it's two-sided, and I think it leads to more productive and empathic conversations when you can make it more than just about yourself. But there are so many different reasons, but it's also very difficult to do. But yeah, there's a lot that I don't share, and there's sometimes where I will choose to not make a video or to take a break rather than make a video, when even if it's about something else, if I'm not okay, because sometimes one of the things that like stresses me out the most is when I actually am not okay, and people are like, what's wrong, what's going on, and I'm like you're not in my life, like stop, I'm stressed. And so it's many different things. But yes, to answer the question, yes, there is stuff I don't share.
and I was on a panel earlier about like protecting yourself online, and the advice that I've given to my community members and everything is just kind of like not giving people the bullets to kill you. Like you're not giving them information that could be really devastating. And I think that's kind of like, to your point, like putting that little protective layer up. And so if you are going to share something online, just my advice is always just make sure that you're doing it with consideration of yourself. Like, what are you okay? If you think of someone who's ever been hateful to you in the past, if you imagine them knowing that information, is that fine? Then you're good. But if not, then maybe sit on it for a bit, you know?
Good bullet analogy.
You like my analogy?
Well, yeah, to piggyback off that, I am very hesitant to talk about anything if I'm not ready. Like, I have to prepare myself for it. Like, there's a conversation that I've been wanting to have for a long time, which is the fetishization of my communities, and that would be like women of color, women with disabilities, and of course queer women. And like, so I want to have that dialogue on my channel, but the thing is, I already know there's the response from a certain audience that I would get. I'm like, I'm not ready to deal with that response. So once I batten down the hatches on my like stability on that, I think basically my emotional stability on that, whether I can handle it or not, then this is a conversation, like I said, I've been waiting to have publicly for a long time. I always have it behind closed doors. I really want to talk about it on my channel, but I'm like, I'm not ready for audience response. And then I would always keep things private, of course, if it involves other people, and it would be harmful to them, and if the content, like I said before, would be harmful to the audience. Like, when the content was too dark, I was like, this is just going to make other people feel worse. And it's cathartic for me to let it out, but it would not be helpful. It would be harmful to release it for audiences to see.
Yeah. I think that those are really good points. Do you think spending, because I always wonder this myself, and I know there are some studies out, but they're not peer reviewed. I don't like them. Just means that a bunch of people haven't read it and decided that it was good and sound. Do you think being on social media, being online for a large portion of our days, I mean, let's be honest, do you think that it's been beneficial to your mental health or detrimental to your mental health? And like, you can weigh the pros and cons, doesn't have to be just one answer.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to vary so much, and it depends on what you're doing online, right? That's so vague. Like, if I'm hanging out in 4chan chat rooms, probably not great for my mental health, just saying. But, you know, what I'm doing has been incredible for my mental health. I'm in a job that I love, that works for me, that works for my ADHD brain. Everything's very fast paced, it's challenging, it's new, there's something exciting going on all the time. I get to hang out, and I got to connect with my tribe. Like, just knowing, I mean, I knew how many people had ADHD, but until you connect with other people who are dealing with what you deal with, and you can see how they're the same and how they're different, and you can appreciate the strengths that they have, it allows you to appreciate the strengths that you have too. And then when they have challenges that are the challenges you have, you feel less alone, you feel less weird, you feel like, oh, it's okay, like I've got this community that doesn't judge me for this and understands and laughs that, you know, I checked into the hotel and 5 minutes later I was locked out of my room, you know? So it's just, it's been really powerful and really positive for me, but I did have to set boundaries. You know, I had to eventually go, okay, this YouTube thing, like being online, social media, basically everybody takes their work home with them now. Between email and social media, and especially YouTube, like, you have to decide what your work hours are and what they're not. And for me, I'm like, okay, I know I'm obsessive, I know that I'm a perfectionist, I know all these things about myself. 1 day off a week, that's all I'm asking. Like, just, I give myself 1 day off a week, and that's it. But it keeps me sane.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I work a full-time job as well, and
wow.
So that has been something that, especially like in the last 2 months, I haven't uploaded a video, and that has partially been on purpose, because to answer the question, there is really no answer for me. My needs change as I change, as my life changes, as my life adjusts. There's some times in which I need to just dive in and have the community and have all of that, and it is so helpful. And there are other times, like the last couple of months or so, where like I felt the need to, and I have detached from it, which is a little sad sometimes, because I do miss it. But part of a productive aspect of that is that I miss it, you know, and then I want it back, you know. But because there was times where it was becoming a source of anxiety for me, where it was becoming, it felt like a responsibility. It felt like something in my heart wasn't fully and totally in it, and I don't want to be doing that. I'm an obsessive perfectionist person as well. So currently my life has been focused on my job, you know, and you mentioned the work hours there, so it's awful hard to come home from that and then go do this, you know. So that's a challenge that I'm currently navigating, because there's been a lot of adjustments having to be made with that. And so I've actually taken time off of social media, but there's pros and cons to both. And sometimes I need to dive in. Sometimes I need to immerse myself in it. Other times I need to get space. Other times I need to do only make art and just completely feel. Sometimes I need to share everything. Sometimes I need to share nothing. So much of it is about listening to myself and listening to my needs and not overextending myself, because that's a bad habit that I have, in which I more than burn out to the point where I am just miserable, and that's not the kind of person that I want to be anymore. So respecting my needs, which can sometimes mean doing something that seems counterintuitive on the surface, which in my case is stopping making videos, which is a thing that saved my life, you know? But it's, you know, it's fluid, it's living, it's alive, because you're alive.
Self-care.
Exactly, it's totally self-care, yeah.
I'm like, yay! Social media is my lifeline until it isn't. And I mean that in the sense, like, well, I have chronic illness, and I spend a lot of time in bed and isolated. And by a lot, I mean like 99% of the time. Like, my life is very Frida Kahlo style, like bed, isolation, that's it. And all I have is, like, maybe when I'm feeling like good enough to do it, like those 10 minutes that I take to film. And then I also, Frida Kahlo style, have a easel on my bed where I can work from a laptop while I'm lying down on my back. So, like, social media is my window to the outside world. It is my window to socialization. Like, I compared Frida Kahlo just now, and like, she's like someone that I really look to as like the only person I know in history that has the same identifiers as I do, which is a queer Latinx artist creator with chronic pain. So I like, that's like the one person like representation style that I can look to. And I always ponder, like, dang, what if homegirl had the internet? What if she had social media to like reach people? Because that's why a lot of her work was, you know, just self-portraits, because that's really all she had was time to herself. And I'm living today with internet and social media, and I'm like, I don't know how I would do it, like just sitting with myself and my thoughts and my mental health, like by myself all the time. And social media has also offered me community, disabled community online, which is incredible. I've met so many like diverse people with diverse disabilities that like are like family now and so concrete, and I'm really happy with that. I wouldn't have met them without the social media and without the internet. So it's very important to me in that way, but then of course it can get very toxic when like I upload something personal and like the anti-style people like grab hold of it and come in mass to say awful things. And that's when I say, even though I love my friends that I have in the same space, I cannot take that space anymore, and I have to shut everything off and just sit in my isolation. So that's a tough decision that I have to make when that happens, but again, self-care, and you have to figure out what is best for you and what your needs are when they are those needs.
Yeah, and I think that's a really cool message, because the whole idea of social media like still blows my mind. Do you know what I mean? The fact that we can connect, that like that's why we're all here. That's why we feel like we know each other. It's a really, really cool tool to connect you, to let you know that you're not alone, to, you know, remind you that other people out there, and like it can be a great place to vent and to get support and find your tribe and your community and all of that. But I always go back to like one of my favorite quotes, which is comparison is the thief of joy. And I find if I personally am on like Instagram, which is like, it's the worst sometimes, you know? Because that's like the best version of everyone's day, and you're like, shit, my life is terrible, you know? Because you're like, they're on vacation in Greece, and look at, they're now over at this event, and look at those new shoes. There's so many things to compare yourself to, and so that's when I find it to be detrimental, is when I'm feeling less than, even though in my day-to-day life I'm feeling just fine. But when I look at other people's and start comparing, and so that's like, I think the only time that I find mental health to be kind of it, for the social media to affect it, I guess, and make me maybe feel a little worse.
Can I add something?
Of course.
Yeah, I think it is really important, because I mean, the addictive properties of, the little dopamine hits that we get when we get a text message or we get, social media or whatever, I think it's just really important. Whatever the research says when it comes out and it is peer reviewed and all that, it's still going to vary from person to person, and it depends on how you're using your time online, and depends on what kind of environment you put yourself in. So you can unfollow people. Like, I don't know if you guys know that. You can unfollow them, you can block them. Like, we both moderate our channel heavily. I decided a long time ago, I was like, this is a safe space. People with mental health issues have been bullied enough. It's not going to happen on my channel. Mm-hmm. And just knowing that you have that power, you have the power to decide what you see online and what you don't to a certain degree, and using it and not feeling bad about using it, because you have to protect, whether you have mental health issues or not, you have to protect your mental health. Yeah. And it doesn't matter if it's going to hurt somebody's feelings if you unfollow them, if they're hurting you, or it doesn't matter, like, if you should be doing more social media than you are right now, or you should be uploading more videos if it's not right for you, if you're starting to feel burnt out or resentful and you need to recharge. I just think it's important to listen to yourself.
Yeah, and I like the thought of, like, we all have mental health. That's just an important thing I want everybody to hear. It doesn't mean that we have to have issues with it, but we all have a mental health that needs to be attended to.
Yeah, and the dopamine hit that was mentioned is definitely very relevant to me, because there's also a contrasting area to that where things maybe aren't going as well as they have been, and the way that it feels like you're going through a withdrawal. It feels like your soul has been ripped out of your body, and there was a period of time this summer where I was losing subscribers for like 2 solid months, and I just felt like my soul was leaving my body. I felt totally and completely horrible about it. And so that feeling is translated over, and that has contributed to me. I need to take a step back, because I feel horrible when I think about this, and I don't want that. Like, I want the exact opposite. I want to love this, and I do love this, but it's just like, there is an aspect, and the way that my brain works is that, there's a side of it, there's a side of success, and I had consistent growth, I had all these things, and when I felt like I lost it, I feel desperate, and I feel completely and utterly like hopeless and horrid and awful, and that's the addict brain right there, and so there's a side of that where it's like, I need to think about myself, I need to kind of come down from this, and I need to figure out what's happening and kind of detox in a way from it, and so that is definitely something that is relevant to my life currently.
Yeah, anything that gives us a dopamine hit is definitely part of that addict brain. It can like trigger that thought right away. I would like to turn it over to the audience for questions. I always like to leave a chunk of time because I know we usually have a lot of questions. We have a microphone coming around, so we'll start with those 2 ladies. Yeah, you can start and then she can go next.
Cool. Hi, my name's Roselle.
Hi, Roselle.
Hi. So over the past 2 years, I've documented my journey to health. For me, that's included weight loss, but has also included my mental health, food addiction, anxiety, depression, and like my self-care, body image, all of that. And sometimes I find myself becoming a little bit too reliant on like the vlogging and talking to my camera and being like, this is how I feel, I had a really bad day. And for me, it's really important to maintain my recovery, both on my channel and being able to do that without my channel if for whatever reason I don't have access to it, or I don't want to be reliant solely on my channel for my recovery. So I want to know if you guys have any tips or, just ways I could do that, because I do find myself getting a little bit too reliant sometimes on my channel for my addiction recovery, that kind of thing.
Yeah, for kind of like extra support.
Exactly. In a way. Yeah. So I want to like maintain my recovery without being too reliant on my channel, even though my channel is like my life.
I think a lot of it's like, and this is going to sound like business talk, but it's just a word that we use in business, but I apply it to like mental health. We need to be diversified. It sounds like business, but it's like, yes, that can be like 20%. But then we kind of have to fill our pie with other things, like whether that's like a group or a meeting or talking with a friend, or if we have a sponsor, or different parts, as well as like your therapist, dietitian. Like that's why I always talk on my channel about like a treatment team, and that can look different for whatever your ability to pay for that kind of team or ability to have that team. But like make a team, however you can put it together, and then just make sure that you're giving the same amount of time-ish to each part of your team, so that they're all healthy, they all know where you're at, and you can tap into them when you need to, so you're not like relying on one and feeling like, oh, that's like my life raft. Yeah.
I became in my first year of sobriety as addicted to YouTube and making vlogs as I was to any narcotic, and because it became like YouTube became life or death for me, and it has led to some side effects. Like when it isn't going well, it's like I feel like I'm losing everything. something that has helped me, and this is contrary to like a lot of people and their goals, like at an event like this, where most people want to get to be full-time on YouTube, getting a day job for me has been critical, and having a life that exists outside of creativity and art has been amazing, especially in this particular period of my life, where I've had that area to almost just like, like put this part to the side for now, invest myself in this life outside, in social environments, in my relationships that I have with people and significant others and such, and just be the best I can be in those environments so that I can be strong and ready to come back to those, because this side is also important. I just got to put it to the side for now. So yeah, definitely diversifying. I have found doing jobs that challenge me has been helpful. I have always had really massive phone anxiety. Like, you put me on a stage, I'm totally comfortable doing this. However, on a phone, I'm like, no. And so I had a job a little bit that I had a job where I was answering phones and like answering questions and dealing with solutions and trying to find that. It was part of what I did, but there was also a part of that job, and I still do a job like that, where I'm dealing with people by their hundreds every day. And I'm an introverted, anxiety-ridden, depressed individual, and that's hard. So it kind of contributes to me continuing my recovery, continuing my progress, especially socially. For those who are dealing with addiction recovery, it's socially, that side is fucking difficult. And it will continue to. I'm 5 years into this, and it's still hard. But yeah, finding those areas where you can continue to work on yourself and have other productive venues for you has been really important for me. Yeah.
I'm not sure if this is the exact thing that you're looking for, but I know when I was recovering from body dysmorphic disorder, I actually had to kind of isolate myself from media in general. So maybe that's something to try. I don't know for how long, like a break or something. Tried practicing with breaks from YouTube, because that can actually be a lot more helpful, because you don't have the perpetuation of toxic things. For me, I had to I was like, I'm not listening to the radio anymore. I'm not watching cable television. I don't want to see commercials that are subconsciously entering my brain. I completely took myself off the grid in that way, and made the focus my mental health. I made the focus I want to shut everything. I shut off all the noise, and just focus on this self-therapy that I did, kind of mirror work, talking to myself in the mirror, and practicing different things, pushing the things that we're scared of in regards to mental illness. I've had body dysmorphic disorder, so I have a fear of my body, and so started pushing myself to go to the beach in the bikini, which I was terrified of. I felt every single jiggle possible. It was really terrifying. And photo shoots and things like that, just pushing my boundaries in that way, little steps. And I focus basically just on that kind of what am I comfortable with today? Okay, let's push it a little further today. Let's push a little further today until and that's what helped me ultimately get to a really stable place with my mental health, shutting everything else off and just focusing on the recovery, focusing on bettering myself.
I'm impressed you did exposure therapy all on your own.
Yeah, thanks.
I just want to add something brief to that, and it's on my mind just because we just did an episode about it, but the impact of exercise on your brain is phenomenal. We're talking about dopamine hits, norepinephrine, the endorphins that you get from exercise. I stopped exercising because I was like, nobody can see me. I'm like this on screen. It doesn't matter, because I used to be an actress and exercise was really important. I had to have a certain body. And then, so I stopped, and I noticed I was more stressed, and I actually wasn't getting more done, and all of these things. I was starting to have more anxiety, different issues, and I was like, so I looked into it, and yeah, exercise is really important for the brain, especially if you're dealing with mental health issues. Anxiety, it's fantastic for anxiety, depression, ADHD, any of those.
Mm-hmm. In moderation, though, I just have to say that.
Yes, no, of course. 3 to 5 times a week, 30 to 60 minutes of moderate intensity cardio is, according to research, the best. But I mean, honestly, just do what you like. If you're exercising and you're I hate this, probably not great for your mental health. Yeah, probably not. Probably try something else.
Next question. And the black and white jacket right next to the woman that just, I said she'd go next.
Hi, my name is Marissa, and I have a channel
Marissa.
called 70 Pounds of Life. And similar to her, I've documented my weight loss and the mental, journey that comes along with that. The question that I have for you guys is, I'll just tell you what I've been dealing with, and I would like to hear your reaction to it, just to see if I'm not alone in my reaction. So I get a lot of messages and emails and DMs from my subscribers and my followers, and they're asking me for my help and using the verbiage like I'm begging you, like I'm dealing with depression and I want to lose weight, how can you help me? And I know that there are resources that I can give to them, and I do that, but what I'm asking is, how do you guys deal with that? Because for me personally, my stomach sinks and I get very anxious because I want to help them with like my whole being, but I'm still trying to help myself and learning as I go, and I can't be responsible for other people along the way. I can only share my journey with them. So how have you guys experienced that, and how do you deal with that?
I mean, every day. It took me a while to get used to it, the pressure to help everyone. But I think, and I've talked about this a lot on my channel, I'm sure my viewers know, but I talk about boundaries a lot. And I also talk about, like, I'm only one person, I can't, I'm not able. And the truth is, it's really maybe you having a communication with them where you make a video like, hey, I'm feeling really guilty about this, and I felt like shit because I can't help everybody, and oh my God. And then it's having the conversation with yourself where you let yourself out. Like, you tell yourself, and this sounds silly, but sometimes when I get comments like that, like, I think to myself, you know what? I'm putting information out there that's helpful. I'm doing the best I can, and I am just one person, and I'm only responsible for me, and they're responsible for them. And trust me, if they found your channel and they're in your comments, they have resources, they can search that too. And I think just reminding yourself, like, there are resources available, I have offered up resources, and letting yourself out. And that's something that, like, for myself, my self-talk, I was like, you, like, chained yourself up, Katie. You can let yourself out. Like, I'm the only one that's making myself feel shitty about it when you're doing a great thing. That's awesome. Just you're helping, and people will find resources. There's so many of us doing it, they'll find something. Got to change your self-talk and be like, it's okay. I'm doing what I can.
Yeah, I want to add to that as well, because that really broke my heart early on. I get so many stories, and because I'm the only person on YouTube that's really doing this for ADHD, I felt so responsible for helping, and it's so hard when they come to you and they're like, you're the only one who understands, you're the only one who can help. I got 2 pieces of wonderful advice about that from professionals, and one was, are you responsible for them or are you responsible to them? Because there's a huge difference. We're responsible to our viewers. We're responsible for providing accurate information, for sharing our personal stories. We're not responsible for how their life turns out, and it's really hard to draw that line and let that go. But another way, like the other piece of advice that I got was, anytime somebody says, oh my gosh, you totally understand me, you are the only one, be like, yes, there are a lot of us who are going through what you're going through. Like, broaden that out. As good as it can feel sometimes to be the one person who gets them, and it does, it's really important to let them know there's a whole lot of people that can help. It's not just me. Make yourself, this sounds a little weird, but make yourself a little less special in their eyes and be like, look, I'm one person bringing you this information, but here's, like Katie was saying, here are resources. Here are so many places that you can get this help. And I'll even admit sometimes, like, I might not be the best person to help you because I'm so busy and I can't give you one-on-one attention. I obviously can't meet with you in person. I'm not even a doctor. I'm not a therapist. Like, I'm just a fellow tribe member. So it's important to not let anybody lean on you too hard, because I've had bad experiences with that, and scary experiences back before I knew how to set those boundaries.
I have one example when I hear this question of something that happened in like 2013, where there was somebody who approached me like that in a situation that involved life and death. And at one point in time, we were messaging back and forth, and then the messages stopped coming. And I still, to this day, don't know what happened. And that killed me for a very long time. In a similar way to what people are saying here, and I also kind of reference something that happened to me in the program that I was in about 5 years ago. And it's that I only have my story. I only have my experience, and that's all that I have. That's all I have to offer. So when I'm giving advice or when I'm speaking about things in general, broad terms, I try to avoid saying things like you. I try to avoid using any other tense but the first person, because that is all that I have. So in situations when people come to me and put the onus completely on me and that burden, I try to deliver it in the gentlest and most empathic way possible, but I low-key call out that behavior because that is a manipulative behavior that a lot of very sick people employ, in which they put all of the pressure on somebody else to save them. And I'm sure many of us have been there personally, where we just want somebody to save us, and we project all of that onto another individual, whether that's in a relationship, whether that's whatever. I've had people do it to me because they see what I make on YouTube and think I can save them. It's led to horrible relationships in my personal life outside of YouTube. But I try to creatively, sincerely, and emotionally respond in a way that says, it's not okay to do this to someone, and this is not going to help you, this behavior. Here's resources that can help you, but in the end, you help yourself. Regardless of whatever systems you have in place, whatever teams that you have, in the end, it's you that saves yourself. And I think that a lot of people, they want to give all the credit to someone else. And I'm like, no. And I try to turn that into an empowering moment where it's like, no, you deserve to give that credit to yourself. Actually, there's another example in which, it was at last Vidcon actually, where somebody came up to me and they said something along the lines of, your video saved my life. And usually when somebody says that to me, I kind of gently say back, I said, no, you, in the end, like, I'm so happy to have been a part of that. Like, but you heard something I said, you connected that to your life, you found the inspiration, and then you did it yourself. And he looked at me, and I remember it's like no one had ever given him anything credit for anything in his life. And he broke down, and then I break down. We're in the expo hall, like crying like a mess, and I'm like, oh my god. And so like that's like a moment like that where it's like there is an element of, I need to point attention to the toxicity of what you've just said to me and how that is affecting me as a person. But I also want to empower you. And I want to do so by citing examples in my personal life and in my experience. But that's all that I have, and that's all that I can offer. In the end, it's you that does that. And in the process of verbalizing all of that, usually it becomes cathartic and therapeutic for me. And it kind of sheds that burden that I initially felt, that I need to save this person.
I'm really glad I heard you say that. I've never heard it like put into those words before. to echo the comments that you tend to receive. I get the similar thing, and like it also comes from youth, which is very hard because it's youth that's seeking out help, and like their parents are a big obstacle in receiving that help, and not just in mental health, but like this whole topic has me really emotional. I think that all of us on stage can empathize with that, because I think we probably had a time where we didn't see ourselves out there, and so now we are the person that we needed when we were younger, so so like one of the messages that I see sometimes is like, so I had to transfer from mobility aid to mobility aid, from using a cane to using a manual chair. Now I use a power chair with the degenerative style of my disease, and so there are kids, there's youth, there's teenagers who are also dealing with this undiagnosed disease because it's rare, and a lot of doctors don't know what it is, and they're losing abilities, and their parents don't want to admit it, and they say, and they save their own money to get a cane, and then their parents take it away from them, and they send me messages like that, like, I can't walk, I can't get out of bed, and my parents don't believe that I'm sick. And I'm like, I don't know how to help you. Sorry. So all I can say is like empathize, because that's a helpless feeling when, especially particularly youth, are going through these things, and like there's no real
a resource to say, here, this is where you can go, because the parents will continue to be an obstacle.
That's my biggest issue as well. How do you handle that, Katie?
Sorry, now you got me all teared up. I think the thing that I always try to tell I gotta get it together. I always tell my audience, like, there are ways to get help without your parents, and I know that it's harder, but it's there. And technically, legally, and I'm speaking in the state of California, which I know is like limiting, but most states are very similar. But I could see a client without parental consent if they're over, in the states it kind of varies, like across the states, like between 12 and 13. I think it's 13 in California. I always forget the exact age. If they can participate mentally in therapy, if they can afford to pay me, which a lot of people will see you for free, just throwing that out there, or a very small fee, and there's a reason to not include the parents. That's all we have to have. So it's a very limited, and I know that medical treatment can be trickier, but they can still go to an emergency room and they have to be seen. And sometimes knowing the right terms to use to ask for the certain tests could be the empowering resource. And so I think that in a lot of ways, where there's a will, there's a way. And it sucks to have to be your only advocate, but who else is going to do it? You know, sometimes we're our best voice. And so I always try to empower people to, like, reach out, speak up, because there is help available. And if you knock at that door, someone's going to open it. And so, you know, don't think that just because your parents say no that you actually can't, because you can. And professionals can see you and you can get help. You can't turn somebody away. Next question. Let's go all the way then.
This question is specifically for Jessica, but I have ADD, and I just want to know some tips to maybe stay focused more in the classroom and whatnot.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm just finishing up a top 10 homework tips video this week. Also, I don't know do you use any fidget toys?
Occasionally.
Do they seem to help you?
Depending on what the situation is and what class. Like math class, we weren't allowed to have them.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Do you have a therapist? They can write you a letter for that. Just throwing that out.
Get
there.
accommodations.
I can make you, I've made schools do a lot of things.
No, but me and my parents are looking into it.
Are you getting any sort of treatment?
I mean, I go to a school that just smaller classrooms, teachers do help with that type of stuff, so yeah.
That's great. I mean, all I can tell you is it's different for everybody. I would speak to a doctor maybe. For me, I needed medication. That's not the answer for everybody, but for a lot of people with ADHD, about 80%, it's really effective. I personally can't focus without it. But ADHD is, like many mental issues, is on a spectrum. So there are some people that can do fine with exercise, like I was talking about earlier. Make sure that you're getting out and exercising at least 3 times a week, like 30 to 60 minutes, moderate. It doesn't have to be anything crazy. Just like go have fun outside for 30 to 60 minutes a few times a week, and that can improve the symptoms a lot and help you focus in class. Moving in class, if you're feeling like fidgeting or whatever, moving in your seat, that's actually good for your brain. That's how we focus. You also, could check into accommodations. There's something called a 504 plan that you might want to talk to your teacher or have your parents talk to your teacher about. There are things that you can do to help you focus. There's a kid your age that I know who doesn't have to sit at his chair if he doesn't want to. He can stand and work at his desk, and that helps him. You just it's a process of trial and error, but you can get evaluated and figure out like what kind of accommodations would be helpful for you and if medication would be right for you. There's just so many solutions now that you just kind of have to see what works.
Yeah, and the terms at your school, like are 504 and IEP. And IEP stands for Individualized Education Plan, and every school has different plans, but you just have to get assessed. You just have to have the paperwork from the psychologist that says, yes, you have ADD. And you're like, I know. And then they put together a plan that works for you. So like being able to get out of your chair, all that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked to my doctor, and he's just said maybe medications, but maybe not, and we've always kind of just leaned away from them.
Yeah, and that's absolutely a valid choice. If you don't feel like you need them, then you don't have to. But if you do get a 504 plan, I have a video about it. I can meet me after, and I can give you the link. about how to get those accommodations. They'll evaluate you and see if there are certain areas in which you need a little extra help or maybe extra time on tests or anything like that. But in terms of just focus, there are things you can do. Taking notes in a way that works for you can help you stay engaged. You can play games with yourself. Like anytime you can gamify something, like maybe, pretend you're gonna have to explain this to your friend after class or whatever.
Yeah, like my school, they help if like you're just kind of stuck on stuff, and like they always give you as much time as possible typically.
That's
but
great.
That's awesome.
The part that I struggle with is I sometimes just doze off in class, like in very few classes it happens.
Yeah, ADHD brains tend to be chronically under aroused, so we basically aren't getting enough stimulation. So that's what the medication helps with. It's a stimulant, so it basically gives your brain the stimulation it needs so that you don't fall asleep or end up like your brain's bouncing all over the room looking for more stimulating things to be doing. So I'm not a doctor, but it might be something to look into, only because there's a lot of misinformation out there about medication, and there's a lot of, scary stories going around. It's actually really safe. It's really well researched, and it might be something to consider if you're really struggling.
All right, thanks for all y'all's help.
You're welcome.
Thank you. We have time for one more question. Let's go over there in the cream sweater with her hand. Oh, no, ahead, right there. Raise your hand a little. Yeah. I was like, let them know where you are.
I have a body-focused repetitive behavior, and for the first 20 years of my life, I actually thought I was like the only person on earth who had it. And specifically, it's dermatillomania, which is skin picking. And so it's just kind of moving to me. I'm sorry. To see mental health we talked about, because it's just really hard to grow up and just feel ugly and hated, and just to go online and find other people who can talk about it. And I didn't mean to cry.
It's okay.
But actually, Katie, I drew a picture of you.
Aww. Stop making me cry, people. Thank you. We'll do one more question. Right there.
Hi, my name's Grace. So I'm currently going to be a junior in high school, and I want to start talking about mental health on my channel because I feel like it's an interesting narrative. Like, there's not many high schoolers who go to therapy or at least make it known, but I live in a very conservative, very small town. So how do I go about doing that without facing backlash in real life, or being able to face it with like a smile or kill 'em with kindness? Like, what do you have any tips for that?
Are you wanting to share your own story?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that was. I'm like, who wants to take this? I think that my best advice about sharing your own story is just being okay with what you put out there and taking your time with it. I think something that Megan Tonjes said in the panel I was on earlier, she said, like, a lot of times I think it's good to sit and digest it. So like recording something, watching it, thinking about it, thinking if everybody in school knew and watched this video, would I be okay? And that the answer is yes, then boom, hit publish, do it, It can be really empowering, it can be really beneficial.
Knowledge of self is the greatest armor that you can have. Not only that, but comfort in yourself. I privately identified as gender fluid for like 7-8 months before making a video about it. And I only made the video about it when I was fully ready, and then when it became something that wasn't a huge deal for me. It didn't feel like this massive revelation that I put out into the world that was going to be a huge deal. For me, that's very helpful. I am an extremely, sometimes obsessively reflective individual. And the way that I go about my life, there have been many people who have had opinions about me based on past behaviors. This is one thing that many people in addiction recovery experience because it's not only stigmatized, it's criminalized, right? And there's a lot of people who, in my life when I was first sober, they didn't buy it. They didn't believe me. They didn't trust anything I said. They had reason to because of the way that I behaved before. But I adopted this mindset and it's relatively simple. It's like a two-pronged sort of life approach, and it's number one, be excellent. Just kind of do your best, whatever it is that you do. It's just whatever it is that you're doing, do it as best as you can with the knowledge and the confidence of yourself. Take your time to get to that point. And number two is let nothing stop you, because there's gonna be noise. You know, there is always gonna be noise. Like, everybody always has something to say. But knowledge of self is the key there, and that's why therapy is extremely helpful for that. It was really critical for me. Still would be to this day. I'm still looking for a therapist. Because what it does is it arms you with not only knowledge of self, but confidence in self, in that you know that you're okay, you're just doing this in your own way. So when you do that, and you kind of have that ability and that knowledge and that armor that you have within yourself, and you put your message out there, you're ready for that backlash or whatever that comes. Because it's going to come. There's always going to be dissent. There's always going to be disagreement, which in many cases can lead to productive and really enlightening conversations when you're, especially like if you're confronted with information you've never been exposed to before. I know many of us, and that's one of the benefits of this kind of community, where we can talk about things that we've never heard about and maybe had preconceptions about that we then overcome and learn about. And it takes a strong-ass person in order to change somebody's opinion. It takes a whole lot. And I don't want it to sound daunting and intimidating, but you're totally entitled to take as much time as you need. You're totally entitled to care for yourself in whatever way you see fit, and to do what kind of sets yourself up for success. And that's all you, and you have the power and the ability to do that, and you should feel empowered to do that, and to just take your time with it, because it's different for every single person.
Yeah, and I want to thank you. That's all the time that we have, but thank you all so much for coming, and because of each and every one of you, people know they're not alone. We keep sharing our stories. It's powerful. Thank you.